Be'ezrat Hashem, today we are starting a brand new perek, Daf Lamed He Amud Bet, Perek HaCholetz. So just basic background information that we need for this perek with regard to Yibum is only when a person dies without children. If a person dies and they have children, there's no Yibum. The whole point of Yibum is really to continue the lineage of the deceased brother. So if someone dies and there is no children, that's when the brother does Yibum. If someone dies, or Chalitza, if someone dies and there is children, then there is no Yibum and no Chalitza. So now, let's go to the Mishnah. So, HaCholetz li'yivimto. Somebody did Chalitza, right? His brother passed away, and he did Chalitza, he didn't want to do Yibum, he did Chalitza to the brother's wife. So when a person does Chalitza to a woman, in certain ways, it's similar to a get. The Rabbanan, she's not allowed to marry a Kohen. Just like a woman who received a get is not allowed to marry a Kohen, so also a woman who got Chalitza is not allowed to marry a Kohen. Now, v'nimtzet me'uberet. Now this guy did Chalitza to this woman, and then afterwards, it comes out that she was pregnant. Now, at the time that he did Chalitza, it seems like he didn't realize. Then afterwards, they find out, she was pregnant. V'yalda, and she gave birth. So, bisman shehavlad shel kayama, when the child is a living child, so that means that the Chalitza was really unnecessary, and it didn't mean anything. So, hu mutar bekrovoteha, he's allowed to marry her relatives. She's not considered a Chalutza to him. It's not considered like he did if he does Chalitza to her, there are certain relatives, which we're going to learn about, that become Asur on him. He can't marry her mother, he can't marry other relatives that become Asur on him if he did Chalitza to her. So, since this Chalitza didn't mean anything, because it turned out that she was pregnant and she ended up having children, so he's allowed to be with her relatives. Vehi muteret bekrovav, she's allowed to marry one of his relatives. No, he did Chalitza, but no Yibum, but it came...
That's next.
The next case is going to be
the next part.
Okay, so he does. So this case is he did Chalitza, and it turns out that she was pregnant and she had a baby, and the baby lived. So in that case, the Chalitza is as if it didn't happen. It doesn't mean anything. She's allowed to marry his relatives. He's allowed to marry her relatives. Lo pasla mina kiuna, and she's muteret to marry a kohen. Now, ein havlad shel kayama, if the child did not live, it was a bar minah, it was a stillborn or a miscarriage. So, hu asur bekrovoteha, he is that. In that case, it sounds like we're giving some validity to that chalitza, and he's not allowed to marry her relatives, and she's not allowed to marry his relatives. Vehi asur bekrovav u psula min hakeuna, and she is pasul from marrying a kohen. So, pretty simple, right? If the child is a living child, then the Chalitza means nothing. If the child is not a living child, it sounds like what we're saying, this is a very, very important key thing. It sounds like what we're saying is, the Chalitza is a valid Chalitza. But it's not really true. It's going to come out in the Gemara, there's a machloket. Whether we're saying the Chalitza is completely valid, or whether it means, no, the Chalitza is invalid. You still have to do another Chalitza, but she's still Pisula l'keuna, and cannot marry his relatives. We're going to get to that in the Gemara.
So at the time of the Chalitza, there was no indication that she was pregnant initially. Is that what's happening?
I don't know if it makes a difference necessarily. It could be they didn't realize. It could be they did realize, they didn't know.
She'd have to know,
Okay.
All right.
Okay, hakones et yevimto. I mean, Tosfot asked the question. Tosfot says we're talking about somebody. You're not supposed to do chalitza or yibum. You're supposed to wait 3 months to make sure that she's not pregnant.
Before doing either.
Yeah. So Tosfot says, well, it's going to be a machlok about chalitza in the Gemara, but Boker Tov. So Tosfot says that we're talking about a case, obviously, that he did it within 3 months. Also, otherwise, in the case of yibum, it makes more of a difference because in the case of Yibum, if he married and did Yibum, you don't know who the father of the child is. So, okay. So, hakoneset yevimto. So, somebody who does Yibum. The brother does Yibum. V'nimtzet me'uberet. And then it comes out that the lady was pregnant all along. v'yalda, and she gave birth. So bisman shehavlad shel kayama, if the child is a living child, so yotzi, he has to divorce this woman, meaning he has to leave her. There's not even a formal divorce. It was a this is an erva. There was no kiddushin.
No get or nothing.
Well, okay, so we have to get the case very clear, because it could be, meaning let's just play out the case. So you have a scenario where there's one brother, he dies without children. The other brother does yibum right away, and then she gives birth. She becomes pregnant. She gives birth. Now, we're talking about. It's very likely that this birth was from the first husband. So since it's possible that it's from the first husband, he has to leave this wife. V'chayavin bekorban. He has to bring a korban. Right. This is. I'm sorry. This is. He has to bring a korban chatat, right? Because he was with Eshet Ach Shelo B'Mkom Mitzvah. He was with. If he turned out that she was pregnant all along, she was pregnant with the thing is talking about a case where we know she was pregnant with the child of the original husband, right? The original brother, the original husband, right? So she has to bring a korban. They have to bring a korban chatat because he was with his brother's wife in a scenario where there's no mitzvah of yibum, because she ended up having a child. So they have to bring a korban. So this is if the child is a living child. V'im ein avlad shel kayama, but if the child is not a living child, meaning that she had a miscarriage, so yikayem, he's allowed to stay with her. Now, safek ben tesha l'rishon, safek ben shiva l'achron. This is the case where it's a safek. Meaning, in the other cases, she was for sure pregnant from the first brother. The question is just, does the baby live or not? So if the baby lives, then here, actually, I think it's here. I think you're looking for. I think it's here. I think maybe on. Yeah, I see it there on the wall by the chumash. So just to clarify, first case is we know that it belongs to the she's pregnant from the first brother. So if the baby lives, then they have to separate. That yibum was not a valid yibum. If the baby doesn't live, so then they could stay together. Safek ben tesha l'rishon, safek ben shiva l'acharon. Now let's say you have a case where it's a safek whether, meaning she became pregnant and she gave birth, but they didn't wait 3 months to do yibum. So what happened was, brother number 1 died. We're by Lamed He Amud Bet, the end of the Mishnah. So the case is, one brother died, the second brother did yibum, and she had a baby 7 months later. So did she become pregnant and have a baby in 7 months from the second husband?
How would you know?
Or is it a baby from the first husband? So it's a safek. We don't know who the father is. So in this case, what happens? So safek ben tesha l'rishon, safek ben shiva l'achron. We have a safek whether it's a 9-month baby from the original husband, in which case there's no yibum. If the baby really belongs to the first husband, the yibum here has to be stopped. This second relationship has to be stopped. It's erva. But there's also a safek that it's ben shiva l'achron, that it belongs to the second brother, and everything is good. He did yibum, he had a baby, right? So yotzi, they have to separate, because maybe really it belongs to the first husband, and there's a safek here that maybe he's being with his brother's wife in a scenario where there's no mitzvah of yibum. V'avlad kasher, but the child that they have is kasher either way, because if it belongs to the first husband, so then the child is kasher. Right, and if it belongs to the second husband, so then his yibum was a kasher yibum. The child is kasher. Either way, the child is not going to be a mamzer. V'chayavin be'asham talui, and they have to bring a korban asham talui. Okay, because it was a safek over here. Okay, so basically,
who's going to be in the korban?
The brother and the lady.
Both of them?
Yeah, because they both did a safek isur over here. Okay, so itmar. So now the Gemara gets into a very big machloket Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So itmar, Hacholetz lemeuberet vehipila. If somebody did chalitza to a lady who was pregnant, and then she didn't end up having the baby, she had a miscarriage. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Eina tzricha chalitza min ha'achin. Rabbi Yochanan said that was a good chalitza. She doesn't need any more chalitza. Reish Lakish Amar tzricha chalitza min ha'achin. Reish Lakish says, no, she needs another chalitza. So this Reish Lakish seems to not be going with our Mishnah, which is what the Gemara is going to ask soon. But Reish Lakish says she needs another chalitza. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan Amar en tzaricha chalitza min ha'achin chalitzat meuberet shema chalitza. Rabbi Yochanan says she doesn't need another chalitza. Why? Because when a person does chalitza to a lady who's pregnant, as long as she doesn't end up having the baby, that chalitza is a good chalitza. Ubiyat meuberet shema biyah. And if he does biyah to do yibum with a woman who is pregnant, that's considered a good yibum, as long as she ends up not having the baby. V'Reish Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish holds that tzricha chalitza min ha'achin, that no, she needs a second chalitza, meaning that chalitza didn't count. The chalitzat meuberet lo shma chalitza, ubiyat meuberet lo shma biyah. He says when you do chalitza or yibum to a lady who's pregnant, that chalitza or that biyah of the yibum means absolutely nothing, and it needs to be redone after she loses the baby. So the Gemara explains, B'mai kamifligi, what exactly is at the core of their machloket? So ibaitema kra, ibaitema sevara. There's two ways to understand their machloket. Either we can understand they're arguing about how to learn a pasuk, or they're arguing about a svara. So ibaitema svara. The Gemara says first that how can I explain to you that they're arguing about a svara? So Rabbi Yochanan savar im yavo Eliyahu ve'yomar deha iabra mapuli mapla. Deha iabra mapuli mapla milav bat chalitza ve'ibumhi. If Eliyahu Hanavi were to come right now, right? This lady is pregnant. Okay, this lady is pregnant, and the brother did chalitza to her. So Rabbi Yochanan says that chalitza is a good chalitza. As long as she ends up losing the baby, that chalitza counts. So what's his reasoning? So he says, listen, if Eliyahu Hanavi were to come right now and say, this baby is not going to make it, so you would know right now that she's ra'ui for chalitza. So the chalitza counts. Meaning, later on, the Gemara is going to explain, Hashtanami tigle milta lemafreya. Also here, if Eliyahu Hanavi were to come and tell us she's not going to end up having this baby, then we would know that she's fitting for chalitza, and therefore the chalitza would count. So also in this scenario where she ends up not having the baby, and 3 months later we find out that that pregnancy wasn't really considered a pregnancy as far as Yevamot is concerned, so it makes it that retroactively that chalitza was a valid chalitza. V'Reish Lakish Amar, and Reish Lakish says Tigle Milta Lemafreya Lo Amrinan. Reish Lakish says no, we don't say this. We don't say that since later on it becomes clear that her pregnancy wasn't a real pregnancy. Therefore, that chalitza was a good chalitza. Reish Lakish says we don't say that. We don't say Tigli Milta Lemafreya. That something that happens later reveals what her status was earlier, and that makes it a good chalitza. No. At the time of the chalitza, she needs to not be pregnant. That's what Reish Lakish says. That a chalitza given to a pregnant lady doesn't mean anything. Veibaite makra, or I could explain their argument about. So according to this, their argument is a very, very broad argument. Igli milta lemafreya. If something happens later on to clarify what the status was of something earlier, do we say that when you did the chalitza earlier, that's a good chalitza? So Rabbi Yochanan says, yeah, that's fine. Reish Lakish says, no, not a good chalitza. Or ivaite makra, or I could explain the argument with regard to how to learn a pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan savar uben en lo. The pasuk says by yibum, it says that if the brother dies, uben en lo, that he dies and he doesn't have a child. So ben en lo amar rachamana. The Torah said he doesn't have a child. V'aledle, he doesn't have a child. There's no child here, right? She's pregnant. There's no child at the end of the day. So that yibum is not a valid. The chalitza is not a valid. Is a valid chalitza because she didn't have a child. Reish Lakish savar ben en lo ien alav. Reish Lakish holds no en lo en teaches us Ian. You have to really look into it and assure 100% that there's no child. Therefore, when she's pregnant, and right now you're not 100% sure that there's no child, the chalitza is not a valid chalitza. So either way, we're left with machloket Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. If a man does chalitza or yibum to a pregnant woman, is that considered a valid yibum or chalitza? Rabbi Yochanan says yes, that's a valid yibum chalitza. She could go marry whoever she wants. She doesn't need another chalitza. And Reish Lakish says no, chalitza done to a woman who is pregnant doesn't count for anything. Et Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Now Rabbi Yochanan is going to bring a proof from our Mishnah to ask against Reish Lakish. What did it say in our Mishnah? So we said in the first case where a guy does chalitza to a lady and he finds out she's pregnant. So en avlad shel kayama, if the child doesn't end up making it, so hu asur bekrovoteha v'hi asura bekrovav. That he is not allowed to marry her relatives, she's not allowed to marry his relatives. Upasla mina keuna, and she became pasul to marry a kohen. So that sounds like the chalitza was a valid chalitza. Right, again, let's clarify here. The brother gave chalitza to a lady who ended up being pregnant. He did chalitza, they did chalitza, she ended up being pregnant. And we said in the Mishnah that she's not allowed to marry a kohen anymore. That sounds like it's a valid chalitza. So Rabbi Yochanan says, this sounds like me. Bishlama ledidi da mina chalitzat miuberet shma chalitza. Rabbi Yochanan says, according to me, that I say that this type of chalitza that's done to a pregnant lady is considered a valid chalitza, so mishumachi pasla, that makes sense why she's not allowed to marry a kohen, because he did chalitza and it was a valid chalitza. Ela ledidcha, Rabbi Yochanan turns to Reish Lakish, he said, according to you, the amart chalitzat meuberet lo shema chalitza, amai pasla min keuna. According to you, Reish Lakish, that you hold that when someone does chalitza to a pregnant lady, it's not considered a good chalitza. So why is she pisula to keuna? Why does she become pasul? If this is an invalid chalitza, so it should count for nothing, and she should be allowed to marry a kohen. Right? He did chalitza to someone in an invalid way. It doesn't invalidate her. So Amar le, so Reish Lakish said, midrabanan ulchumra balma. Reish Lakish said, yeah, I hear your question. This, which she's not allowed to marry a kohen, it's only a chumra midrabanan, because at the end of the day, chalitza happened, even though it was invalid, but it's very close. It looks and smells very much. That's fine. It looks and smells very much like chalitza, and therefore, Rabbanan were machmir, and they said in such a case she should not. She's pisula to keuna. Ikadamri, there's a different version of this back and forth between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Ikadamri et ve'Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Some learn the opposite, that Reish Lakish is the one who's asking against Rabbi Yochanan. And he says like this, Reish Lakish, the one that says that chalitza of a pregnant lady is not a good chalitza. He says, En avlad shel kayama hu asur bekrovotea v'yasura bekrovav upasla min keuna. We said that if a guy does chalitza to a lady, and it turns out that the child doesn't make it, she's pregnant at the time of chalitza, and the child doesn't make it, what did we say in the Mishnah? That the chalitza makes it that she's pasul on his relatives, he's pasul on her relatives, and she's pasula to keuna. So Reish Lakish takes this, and he says, hello, this sounds like me. Now how does it sound like Reish Lakish? So he says, Bishlaba ledidi, de'amina chalitzat meuberet lo shma chalitza. Reish Lakish says, according to me, that I say that the chalitza that's done to a pregnant lady is not valid. So hainu diktani pasla minu keuna lechumra v'lo katani einat tzricha chalitza min ha'achin. He says, it makes sense. It just says she's pasul keuna. That's a chumra. It doesn't say that chalitza was good. It doesn't say she doesn't require any more chalitza. Ela ledidcha, according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, it should have told me the bigger chidush. Eina tzricha chalitza min ha'achin mibayale. If this is a valid chalitza that's given to the pregnant lady, it should have said she doesn't need chalitza anymore. So I would understand, if she doesn't need chalitza anymore, that means that was a valid chalitza, and it comes with all the things that chalitza comes with. She can't marry a kohen, she can't marry his relative, right? So Reish Lakish is pulling out of the Mishnah the opposite of what Rabbi Yochanan is pulling out of the Mishnah. Reish Lakish is saying, look, if you read the Mishnah, it kind of sounds more like me, because it would have made more sense, according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, it would have made more sense for the Mishnah to say, if a guy gives chalitza to a pregnant lady, and then she ends up losing the baby, she doesn't need any more chalitza. According to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that's what it should have said. It doesn't say that. It says, she's pasul keuna. Those things are chumras. But it doesn't ever say that she doesn't need another chalitza. So Amar le, so Rabbi Yochanan says, okay, I hear your question. In achanami, yeah, I hear your question. But ve'aidi detana resha lo pasla, since in the first case, where she has a living baby, the Mishnah teaches us, lo pasla, she doesn't become pasul to keuna, meaning that chalitza meant nothing, and she doesn't become pasul keuna. So therefore, once we structured it like that in the first line of the Mishnah, so Tana Seifa, pasla. So then in the Seifa, in the next case of the Mishnah, it says pasla, that she becomes pasul keuna. So that was one back and forth between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Eiteve, next question asked. Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan, Eitve Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish, Ein havlad shel kayama yekayem. So we said in the Mishnah, if a person did yibum, okay, this is a case where yibum is that. A person did yibum, and he finds out that the lady is pregnant. She was pregnant from her original husband. Okay? So, Ein havlad shel kayama, if the child doesn't make it, yekayem, he stays with her. Okay? So yekayem sounds like he did the yibum already, and he doesn't have to leave her. It sounds like he doesn't have to redo yibum. At surface, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like he doesn't have to redo yibum. He just stays together. So says Rabbi Yochanan, Bishlam ledidi, Damina chalitzat meuber shma chalitza o biad meuber shma bia, that I say that chalitza and yibum done to a pregnant lady is valid as long as she ends up not having the baby.
How do you know she's not going to have a baby?
Rabbi Yochanan says that whatever happens at the end, that reveals that this pregnancy wasn't a good pregnancy, and the bia that you did during the pregnancy is good. That's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion.
So you have to wait to find out since months?
So they have to wait a few months until they find out, does this baby make it or not, and if at any point she loses the baby, then Rabbi Yochanan holds that that chalitza or yibum was good and valid. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan says, according to me, that I say chalitzat meuber shma chalitza o biad meuber shma bia, that the yibum or chalitza done to a pregnant lady is valid as long as we find out that she loses the baby. So mishum hachi katani yekayem. That's why it says in the Mishnah that when a person does yibum to a lady, and then it turns out that she was really pregnant from the first husband all along, and she ends up losing the baby, it says yekayem. He's allowed to stay with her. Ela ledidcha, but according to you, Reish Lakish, da'amart chalitzat me'ubered lo shma chalitza biyat me'ubered lo shma bia, you hold the chalitza and the yibum done to a pregnant lady is not valid. So yachzor v'yiv'ol v'yikayem mibayale. The Mishnah should have said you need to redo the yibum, and then you could stay with her. Because the yibum done when she was pregnant, according to you, Reish Lakish, meant nothing. Therefore, the Mishnah should have said, Yachzor v'yiv'ol v'yikayem. He has to, if he wants to stay with her, he has to redo the kinyan, redo the yibum, and have bia, and then yikayem, and then he can stay with her. So, Rabbi Yochanan is making a diuk, right? The diuk is, the Mishnah says, yikayem. They could stay together. It sounds like he doesn't need any new action of yibum. The yibum that happened when she was pregnant was good. Reish Lakish has to answer this question now. Right? According to Reish Lakish, it would have made more sense to say Yachzor v'yiv'ol v'yikayem, that he has to redo the bia and then yikayem, then he can remain with her. So my yikayem. So the Gemara explains for Reish Lakish, my yikayem. What does it mean when it says yikayem, that he's allowed to be with her? Yachzor v'yiv'ol v'yikayem. that it really means that he has to do a second bia, meaning delosagi. They add in the words belav hachi, delosagi belav hachi, meaning there's no other option over here. Meaning like this. Rashi explains what's he gonna do, right? He can't give her a get because that yibum didn't do anything. He can't give her a chalitza because they already had some type of bia. So even though the yibum wasn't a complete yibum, according to Reish Lakish, yibum that he does to a pregnant lady, right? If you do yibum to a lady, you find out she's pregnant. Reish Lakish said that yibum was completely invalid, but he's kind of stuck. Meaning yekayem means you don't have any other choice but to wait it out, and then you still have to do another yibum. But giving a get is not a choice because you're not married. The yibum didn't do anything. She was pregnant. Doing chalitza is not an option now because you already did a bia, therefore you can't do a chalitza. So you're stuck with having to wait. And that's what it means yekayem. Yekayem means you have to wait it out, and then you have to do yibum and again and make that kinyan, and then you could give a get if you want to let her go. But you don't have any other option to cut her loose any other way. The only way is to be mekayem, which means yachzor v'yiv'ol v'yikayem, that you have to redo the yibum, and then if a person wants to, then he could divorce her beget. That's Reish Lakish's response. Ika Amri, some say the flip happened here. Reish Lakish was the one to ask Rabbi Yochanan. Ika Amri, et v'Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, En avlad shel kayama yekayem. We said in the Mishnah that if he does yibum to a lady, turns out that she was pregnant, En avlad shel kayama, the child didn't end up making it, yekayem, he stays with her. So Reish Lakish says, Bishlam ledidi, de'amina chalitzat miver lo shma chalitza o biyad miver lo shma biyah. The Reish Lakish holds that if he does yibum to a lady who ends up being pregnant, that's not considered biyah, it's not considered a yibum. Hainu diktani yekayem. That's what it means when it says yekayem, yachzor v'yivol v'yekayem. Delosagi b'lav hachi. Like we said, it means yekayem means he has no other choice but to wait it out and to redo the yibum. El ledidcha, but according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, it's not something that he has another option. You hold that that yibum was a good yibum, so he's not stuck with one option of yekayem that he has to be with her. He could give her a get too. So what should the Mishnah have said? Ratza yotzi, ratza yekayem mibayale. The Mishnah should have said he has a choice. If he wants, he could give her a get. If he wants, he could stay with her, right? Because that yibum was a good yibum according to you, Rabbi Yochanan. So that yibum was a good yibum. He's left with two options. If it's a good yibum, that means if he wants, he could give her a get. If he wants, he could stay with her. The yibum was good. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say he has a choice. It says yekayem, which Reish Lakish's understanding means she's stuck with no other choice. She cannot give a get. He cannot do chalitza. The only option is to wait and redo the yibum. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Inachanami, I hear your question, but Aidi, the Tana Resha, Yotzi, Tana Nami Sefa Yekayem. Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, it's true. I hear your question, but since it's a structural thing, says Rabbi Yochanan, since in the first case, the previous case, where the child ends up living, right? He did yibum to a pregnant lady, and the child ends up living. We said yotzi, they have to separate. So therefore, in the seifa, in the next case, it says the opposite of that. It sticks with that structure. It says yekayem, but it doesn't speak out both options. But it's true, he could do both options if he wants. Okay, the next case really goes. What?
40.
Yeah. But I think we'll stop here because the next case goes further into the next amud. So we'll stop here and Be'ezrat Hashem continue tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, Be'ezrat Hashem, bright and early.